Video games are complicated, and the further we evolve from Pong, the more complicated things get. Nowadays, there are so many interesting, complex controllers, mechanics, dynamics, level elements, enemies, and bosses that I could spend hours talking about each one, let alone the emergent combination of these elements. But perhaps that's another show. Today, I'm here to get to the bottom of another issue I've had for some time. The one thing harder than playing video games is talking about them. I've been listening to the discourse on video games since the days of the SNES and Nintendo Power. I remember talking about upcoming games like Donkey Kong Country with neighborhood kids at the bus stop. Since then, and the rise of the internet, the overall quality of our gaming conversations hasn't improved enough. In my experience reading NeoGAF forums, one-up boards, conversations with friends, indie developers, and game testers, and listening to gaming podcasts, G4, and big-time developers, we could really use a common vocabulary to discuss gaming. Old Blue here simply won't do. Coherent communication is the goal. Our gaming language is the problem. Now, this is not to say that everyone who talks about video games is a bumbling, nonsensical communicator. I'm quite convinced that there are a lot of us that really know what we're talking about. Jesper Jewell and David Serlin are two well-known game writers that gave me a kickstart to launching my own blog. By the way, you can find all the links to everything discussed in the show on the YouTube page. So because this dictionary wasn't good enough, I pulled together a gaming glossary with over 285 terms. Yes, video games are complicated, yet I've always wanted to be able to explain just how complicated they are, in great detail. How else am I supposed to compare one complicated game to another? So I spent 2.5 years writing for my blog, breaking down every gaming concept I could think of, developing a clear language as I went along. Now, why do we need a clear language? Well, for one thing, the language gives us power to name, distinguish, and understand the world around us. For two, well, check this out. Having the language lets us look at things from more angles. So instead of saying this cube here is completely solved, we can explain that it only appears to be so from one perspective, and that when you take the other sides into account, the truth is revealed. Good Game is a web series that is in part a video presentation of my blog, paying homage to two great television shows, Good Eats and Mythbusters. The idea is to educate, entertain as efficiently as possible. For the first set of webisodes, I want to look at the language we already use to talk about video games, so I decided to start at home by looking into the Super Smash Bros. Community. One of my basic beliefs going into this investigation is that gamers tend to have really good instincts even if they can't explain or express their ideas well. My reasoning? Because video games are so complicated, the amount of time gamers put into the games they love develops a strong intuitive understanding of the game. Hopefully, just by introducing the right terms and ideas, we can all get on the same page quickly and painlessly, i.e., without sustaining the second-degree burns of a flame war. Speaking of flame war, my investigation stirred up one of the most debated and heated topics in the Smash community. Super Smash Bros. Brawl versus Super Smash Bros. Melee. Or if you prefer, Super Smash Bros. Melee versus Brawl. But rather than start up a thread on the forums and watch the conflagration erupt, I redirected volunteers to this survey. This survey is where all the Smash-related quotes come from. I'm keeping the identities of the submitters anonymous. Even if you don't play Smash, Good Game will give you new ways to think and new terms to use when talking about any fighting game. And if you aren't a fan of fighting games, this series will also be good for understanding concepts like balance, skill, and variation more thoroughly. In other words, there's a lot to learn for everyone. Myth number 1.1. Brawl is not a fighting game, but a party game. The thing is, genre classification is a very loose and unofficial thing. In some ways, we're all free to make a game and a new genre to put it in. Furthermore, games aren't always given based on a game's gameplay. If you play a shooter, you expect some kind of projectile shooting action to be the core of the experience. But if you play an adventure game, you can get anything from Monkey Island to Zelda. Adventuring is more of an experience or feeling than it is an action. So even if Brawl is great at parties, it's best classified as a fighting game, just like Guitar Hero or Rock Band is best classified as a music rhythm game. And considering that Brawl and Melee share about 80% of their design, it doesn't make sense for a Melee player to call Brawl a party game and not call Melee one as well. This myth is busted. Myth number 1.2. Brawl is an uncompetitive game. Brawl? Uncompetitive? At the risk of sounding too straightforward, Brawl is a video game. The players are what bring the competitive spirit to the game. Any game from Pog to Marbles to Rock, Paper, Scissors can be taken competitively, so there's no point in denying the thousands of Brawl players that compete at tournaments around the world. Furthermore, 2010 MLG has Brawl as a major event. This myth is busted. Myth number 1.3. Brawl was intentionally designed not to be competitive. Melee is a perfect accident. This myth is loaded. So first, I'll say that authorial intent doesn't really matter to us. Even if Masahiro Sakurai specifically said he hated tournament-level Melee players and was going to do everything he could to make us hate his next game, which I have found no statement that even comes close to this, his words would mean nothing. At the end of the day, the game is the game. Brawl is Brawl, and everything that we need to determine what kind of game Brawl is contained in the game. What a game is, how it works, and how that affects gamers is what counts. Furthermore, Melee isn't an accident or a fluke. Games aren't created by accident. Sure, there are bugs and other unintentional vestiges from the creation process left over in many games, but most of the beloved advanced techniques and other features in Melee's fighting game engine are very intentional. Though I doubt anyone could have anticipated exactly how far the community would push the game, I'm confident the developers knew about the potential. Take it from someone who has been a part of playtesting Nintendo games. They are very strict and meticulous about the whole debugging process. We can actually test and measure Brawl and Melee to see if Brawl is actually dumbed down, and if so, by how much. Getting to the bottom of it all will require looking at both games with the following topics in mind: skill, depth, complexity, and balance. And that sounds like the next 3 webisodes to me. So don't forget to subscribe and like the video. More importantly, share it with any and everyone you have video game conversations with. From here, we're going real in-depth. By the end of it all, you'll have new tools to bat back the flames of war, end wars, and reach conclusions that's truly worthy of a GG.